Coming up next on the Gay News Network, Gay and Lesbian International Soccer Championships come to the U.S. Openly gay photographer Bruce Weber shoots a homoerotic and controversial new catalog for Abercrombie & Fitch. And Sandra Gillis steps down as the head of PFLAG. Then it's off to the city of friendship as Amsterdam gears up for the Gay Games 1998. Be sure to join us as we journey to this European city of friendship, flowers, and fun. In our latest installment of the Gay Agenda, we'll learn about what's happening in our schools when we talk to students and former teacher Kevin Jennings, Executive Director of the Gay and Lesbian and Straight Educators Network.
You've got to serve everybody who comes into your classroom. So I would say to people who'd say, well, I don't believe homosexuality is good, I think it's bad. You have a right to believe that. You don't have a right to bring that into a classroom and let it compromise your professional behavior as an educator.
And in the Washington Report, Bob Connolly shares the story of two mothers. First, they lost their sons to AIDS. Now they're battling Jesse Helms, trying to stop his verbal attacks on gay men and people with AIDS. Finally, in a special video tribute, we'll look back with rage and remembrance on the 10th anniversary of the AIDS Memorial Quilt.
We must remember what this epidemic has done, what it's doing, and what it's going to continue to do, and that we cannot be silent about that.
All of this and more on this edition of the Gay News Network.
We have always felt in harmony with the land.
Chakome, Tapua, the Skumok, the Tapiachu, Kenok Honestje, Matapua, Makaspumos, Akun.
Help the Soil Conservation Service help our earth. Call us today. We owe it to our children.
At first, we didn't know what to think.
He said he was gay.
We thought we had done something.
I was so angry, so hurt.
We didn't know where to turn. Talking to other families at Parents Flag was a lifesaver.
Now we're closer than ever.
She's the same daughter she always was.
We love him just as much as always.
Parents Flag helped us through it.
You are not alone. Talk to us. We understand. For the Parents Helpline nearest you, call 1-800-4FAMILY.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Gay News Network. I'm Holly Landau.
And I'm Joe Liberatore. Topping our list of international news, more than 30 million people worldwide are living with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. 16,000 new infections occur each day, according to ABC News. The United Nations recently issued a report stating that previous figures underestimated the spread of the virus by 1/3. This raises estimates to nearly 1 in every 100 sexually active people between the ages of 15 and 49 worldwide. That means they're infected with HIV. The report also said that only 1 out of every 10 people know that they are infected. And in 1997, 5.8 million people acquired the HIV virus.
In Israel, a conservative cabinet minister blocked the airing of a television program about the lives of gay youth. The program was scheduled to air on a state-owned television station, according to a Reuters report. Gay civil rights activists won a victory, though, when Israel's High Court of Justice issued a unanimous judgment that forced the state-owned station to air the program. The ruling said that in a world progressing toward the year 2000, homosexuality no longer represents a perversion that needs to be denounced, condemned, and fought.
In Japan's first gay rights lawsuit, the Tokyo High Court ruled that the City Board of Education discriminated against the gay group in 1990 by refusing to let its members hold an overnight study meeting at a city-run youth hostel. The city's case hinged on the argument that letting the group stay overnight in the youth hostel would cause disorder because gay people in the same room would be likely to have sex and cause trouble for the other guests. The rejection of the gay group was unconstitutional in the eyes of Japan's High Court, since it denied gay people equal access to a public facility.
The rest of the world calls it football, we call it soccer, but whatever you call it, Washington, D.C. recently hosted the International Gay and Lesbian Football Association World Cup Tournament. The annual event brought together women's and men's teams from all over the world as hundreds of athletes competed for gold medals. The men's Division I gold medal went to L.A. Suns over the London Lions by a score of 2-0, and the women's gold went to the Stochastic Force over Maryland in sudden death overtime, 3-2.
In other international sports news, the Netherlands is hosting the 6th Gay Games this August. The first time the Olympic-styled sporting and cultural event will be held outside of the United States. 80 venues around Amsterdam are expected to draw a record 15,000 entrants and 40,000 spectators. While nearly half of the entrants will represent the United States, the remaining athletes represent countries in Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Federation of Gay Games selected Amsterdam as the host city because of its tolerant climate and the wide support of the event by the Dutch government.
In a related story, the swimming competition at the Gay Games Amsterdam has been officially sanctioned by FINA, the international swimming body that regulates and officiates aquatic athletic events. FINA approval ensures international recognition of what's expected to be the world's largest swimming event in 1998, with up to 1,200 swimmers participating. Certification also means that times and records will be officially acknowledged according to international regulations, taking the Gay Games to a higher level of athletic competitiveness and worldwide recognition.
Turning our attention now to national news. After calling U.S. Representative Robert Menendez of New Jersey a liar and a coward with no religious commitment, the U.S. House of Representatives barred former Congressman Bob Dornan from the House floor by a vote of 289 to 65. Dornan has long been a foe of lesbians and gays for his vicious attacks. Ironically, just days after losing his re-election bid to a Democratic, pro-gay Hispanic woman, Dornan's former chief of staff and longtime close friend came out of the closet.
Sandra Gillis has resigned as Executive Director of Parents, Family, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, or PFLAG, amid a flurry of controversy. Her resignation came after almost 2 years of internal turmoil. Gillis admitted that the last few months were difficult, but she said that her decision to leave was just a natural outgrowth of being an Executive Director for 4.5 years. However, many chapter members have complained that PFLAG had moved away from the organization's original mission of providing support to parents and families of gays, focusing instead on political advocacy work. High employee turnover rates on the national staff, budget mismanagement, and financial difficulties were also noted problems.
An eye-popping new catalog has some men wanting to order the models, not just the clothes. And some conservatives are crying Abercrombie and filth over Abercrombie & Fitch's controversial new marketing tool, A&F Quarterly. The 132-page catalog is chock full of scantily clad young men in provocative poses. There's even a racy comic and a section titled Unzipped. If all of this seems reminiscent of A&F's locker room campaign from last year, that's because both campaigns are the work of openly gay photographer Bruce Weber. His previous work with the clothing company produced last year's homoerotic and highly controversial ads that featured young men in a locker room setting. Abercrombie & Fitch also hired veteran gay editor Tyler Brule to design the magazine. Attention A&F shoppers, the debut issue of A&F Quarterly is available now.
Lesbians in outer space? Well, that might just be the case in the 24th century if the dreams of lesbian and gay Star Trek fans come true. There's been a lot of speculation about whether the new character on Star Trek Voyager, a half-human, half-cyborg female crew member named 7 of 9, will discover that her sexual orientation is lesbian. For years, many gay and lesbian science fiction fans have lobbied to see their lives represented in gay characters. Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, introduced many socially progressive ideals in the show, and in 1991, he said that gays and lesbians would be a part of the Star Trek universe. When Roddenberry died later that same year, Paramount denied the creator's wishes and backpedaled on his promises. Now a gay science fiction group has posted a petition on the web asking Paramount to have a regular gay character on Star Trek. You can sign the cyber petition at www.gaytrek.com. In the meantime, fans remain cautiously optimistic that 7 of 9 will take Star Trek where it's never gone before.
Coming up next on GNN, witness the work of GLSEN in and out of classrooms across America. Then, an American tragedy, 10 years of the AIDS Memorial Quilt, and still no cure.
Then learn about how 2 mothers are challenging Jesse Helms when Bob Connolly brings you the latest installment of the Washington Report after this break.
Senator Helms was quoted on the floor of the Senate as saying, essentially, that those who died with AIDS deserved what they got.
Coming up next on GNN.
I want you. I want to hold you for hours at a time. I want to talk to you until I don't have a voice. Introduce me to everyone who's important to you, your friends, your family. Look at me. I want to spend my life with you. I'll never hurt you, I'll never lie to you, I'll never put you in danger. There's a time for us to be lovers. We will wait until that time comes.
I want you. I want your hand on my back when I make my way through a crowd. I want to feel you watch me when I talk to my friends. Talk to me. Tell me about your friends, your family. Look at me. I want to spend my life with you. And I'll never hurt you, never lie to you, and never put you in danger. There's a time for us to be lovers. We will wait until that time comes.
Welcome back. On GNN's latest Washington Report, veteran reporter Bob Conley has a candid talk with two mothers who personally experienced the bigotry of Jesse Helms after the deaths of their sons from AIDS.
Until 2.5 years ago, Eloise Vaughn and Patsy Clark were two North Carolina mothers, unknown to each other, unknown to the world, and each coping with the death of their son. But a simple letter to Jesse Helms changed their status from AIDS mourner to AIDS and gay activist and thrust them into the public spotlight as representatives of families coping with the AIDS epidemic. Eloise and Patsy are joining us here today in Washington, D.C. Patsy, Eloise, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell me, Patsy, your son, Mark, died. And you wrote a letter to Jesse Helms. Tell us a little bit about your son and why it was so important for you to write a letter to Senator Helms.
Well, I loved my son very much, and he was a wonderful human being with great intelligence and great charm. My husband had been a friend of Jesse Helms, and I thought, gee whiz, if I write this senator, he'll understand a little bit better. We'll be able to put a face on it. So I wrote him, in great naivete, I wrote him a letter asking him not to judge human beings as deserving what they got if they died of AIDS. Nobody deserves that. You know that. AIDS is a tragedy. It's not a disgrace. And the senator wrote back.
And what did he say in his letter back to you?
I think he meant to be kind. It didn't work for me. He said he did not judge homosexuality. The Bible did. Well, Bob, not my Bible. He also said he was sorry that Mark had chosen to play Russian roulette with his sexuality. Well, my son didn't do that. And then at the end he said, I'm sorry for both you and Mark, but it doesn't change the reality of what happened. I found that less than compassionate, and qualification of sympathy just didn't suit me.
Now, Eloise, you also have a son named Mark.
Yes.
Your Mark also died of AIDS. Tell us a little bit about him.
My Mark was a very handsome, talented young man. He was 34 years old. He was my oldest child. He worked in television in Atlanta, Georgia, and he died. He came home, was sick, and died in my home in Raleigh.
Now, how did the two of you meet each other? Did it have to do with this letter?
No. The letter happened after we met. Someone saw me in a mall right after my son had died and said, I know a woman like you. I'm going to tell her to call you. And I thought, oh boy, I bet. But that night, this blessed woman called me and said, I thought she was going to sell me aluminum siding or some such thing. And I said, oh yes, I'm Patsy Clark. But then she said who she was and about her son. She said, you want to meet? And I said, oh yes, I do. So we met the next day for lunch, and we established immediately a rapport, didn't we, Eloise?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Now, is that how the organization MAJIC, Mothers Against Jesse in Congress, got started?
No, not exactly.
You do it, Eloise.
No, about a year after that, Senator Helms was quoted on the floor of the Senate as saying, essentially, that those who died with AIDS deserved what they got. He was arguing against the funding for the Ryan White Care Fund, the refunding of it. This was written up in our paper, of course, and Patsy and I talked about that, and we're outraged by it. And Patsy said, you know, it's time I did something about this. I think I'll write Jesse a letter and explain it to him.
And that's when it happened. Wrote the letter.
When she wrote the letter.
And just a few months we cried and we wrung our hands for quite a while after that, but neither one of us are inclined to just sit still and wring hands. So within 3 or 4 months we were talking about, we got to do something about this. And we got mothers together who, unfortunately, there are a lot of mothers like us, you know that. We got them together and we suggested this, didn't we?
Yeah.
They looked a little aghast. Magic? Mothers Against Jesse in Congress? But they backed us, and we're all they're really for us, aren't they? We're all the way together.
Well, Patsy Clark, Eloise, Vaughn, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Your efforts are so wonderful in our community, and we appreciate them more than you probably know.
After the break, we'll explore the mission of GLSEN, the Gay and Lesbian Straight Educators Network, and see how they help students, teachers, and administrators grapple with issues of sexual orientation.
Later, we'll take a very special look back at a decade of the AIDS Memorial Quilt and discuss what type of a permanent display should be set up when a cure is at hand, when the war against AIDS is won.
It would be nice if latex condoms were automatic. But since they're not, using them should be. Simply because a latex condom used consistently and correctly will prevent the spread of HIV.
In this installment of the Gay Agenda, we'll take a look at the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Educators Network, or GLSEN, a national organization dedicated to providing diversity training in schools. And we'll learn how their mission of bringing together gay and straight educators, community members, students, and teachers creates a more positive classroom experience for everyone.
Kevin Jennings, Executive Director of GLSEN, is a former high school teacher who co-founded GLSEN in 1990 with fellow teacher Kathy Henderson.
Why can't you look after yourself and not down on me? Do you have to try to piss me off, 'cause I'm easy to please?
I think what has changed for me the most because of coming out has been school. It is not a place where I can feel comfortable being gay, so therefore I cannot feel comfortable being myself.
I was pushed, kicked, thrown against lockers, and worst of all, spit upon like some vile piece of trash.
People in school, my age, really need to see role models. They need the role models in books, they need to know their own history, and they need to see people, real-life people, out in their own schools, who are either gay, lesbian, bisexual, or are allies.
We want to see that every school in America is a safe, open, inclusive, nurturing place for all students.
This is very hard for me to do in a way to talk about this because people have to know. People have to know, and I think if they can put a face on it, here's one face.
I loved being a teacher, or I knew I wanted to be. I had this thing about writing on the chalkboard.
I've been trained to be very conscious of racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, disabled rights, and on. And I find it ironic that all these years I have not pushed for my own rights.
No one in this room and no one in your school is not homophobic. I don't care whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, straight, transgender, whatever. Because you know what? We're all raised on the same planet with the same attitudes. And there's no way we could not have ingested some of those attitudes as a kid.
When I've heard my teachers and peers say dyke and fag, it upsets me. It doesn't make me feel insulted or offended, just sort of sad. Because especially when it comes from teachers, it makes people think that these are acceptable words.
We are increasingly pulling together a network of people around the country who are determined to achieve one goal, to make sure that no child goes to school and is taught to hate people because they are gay ever again in this country.
As a footnote to that story, Jennings was among 100 people named to Newsweek magazine's Century Club, a list of 100 people expected to make a big difference in the next century.
Now, a look back at a decade of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. Since 1987, the AIDS Memorial Quilt has grown to over 175,000 panels.
Washington, D.C. has been home to the quilt on 5 different occasions. Now, however, there's a chance we'll never see the quilt in its entirety again, since it has outgrown the mall to the size of 30 football fields. Let's join Bob Connolly for his report on the last 10 years of the AIDS Memorial Quilt and what may happen to it in the future.
The quilt itself was started in 1987. The idea, however, came in 1985. Every year, Cleve Jones organized a gay pride march in San Francisco to commemorate the life of Harvey Milk, who was the San Francisco commissioner who was assassinated. In 1985, shortly before the march, it became known that the 1,000th person had died of AIDS in San Francisco. And at that time, what happened was Cleve thought that there needed to be some way to remember these people, some way to commemorate their lives. So what he asked was that everybody, he handed out sheets of paper and asked that people write down the names of those people that they knew that had died of AIDS. And during the vigil, they put those panels of paper up on a wall, and in the candlelight, Cleve thought that they looked like a quilt of many colors. And at that point, the idea for an AIDS Memorial Quilt was born.
All of us here brought names to the quilt, friends and people that we have served at our age.
I think it was a whole lot of togetherness and a lot of love and a little sadness, but it was more togetherness. It brought all of us closer together.
I think also the power of the quilt is about coming to Washington and maybe hearing a name of someone who you knew, who you didn't know had AIDS, who is now dead. That happens to many, many people. I've heard many stories, and Cleve has told many stories, and it's happened to most everyone who comes to a quilt display when they're walking along and they see a panel for someone they knew, or they're looking through the list of names and a familiar name comes before their eyes and they didn't know that that person had AIDS.
The foundation itself did not start until 1987. That was the first time that there was any sort of public showing of the quilt. The quilt is displayed nationally at the regional chapters when we go to schools, businesses, churches, and so it's well into the millions have seen it. The quilt has raised approximately $3 million for AIDS research. There's 70,000 names on the quilt.
This quilt is for David Bryan Cook from Akron, Ohio, and I made it because he was the bar owner of the gay bar in Akron, Ohio, and it was very important for all of us to make it. Every patron at the bar, all his friends, his lover, his companion, which they couldn't be here, so I brought it down. I chose the material basically because it's a quilt material. It already has a backing on it. It was easy to work with, and then I took it and I had it professionally embroidered, and then I went to the mall and got his pictures put on fabric, sewed them on.
It's definitely made me take a closer look at my sexual activity, you know, to be a lot safer, use condoms. I only know one person who has AIDS, but it's one too many, you know. It didn't really hit home until you're face to face with someone that you know and you've been on a personal level with, so it's not the best feeling in the world, you know.
Well, indeed, I think that this is a national health problem, obviously, and I think that we don't give it enough attention, and I just need to feel the support of people around this issue.
It's an exhibition of the tragedy that AIDS has been in America, and once people start looking at the panels, if they haven't known anyone who has died of AIDS, they may understand the disease better, and the feelings that the deaths that AIDS causes can leave behind in the survivors, those of us who are still here. They'll see very colorful panels made for people who have died from AIDS that are not always tragic. Sometimes they're very humorous, sometimes they're very poignant, but all of them, all 40,000 panels, are celebrations of the lives, the men, the women, the children who have died from AIDS in this country and in other countries.
Assuming that the AIDS epidemic is wiped out, are there any plans for the quilt's future on that day?
Well, hopefully we want that day to come tomorrow and as soon as possible. But definitely the quilt will continue. We don't know what will happen, whether there will be some sort of a museum, whether just parts of it will be displayed, but it will continue to be displayed in some way.
Definitely think there should be a way that someone can step forward and say that they're going to build a memorial and have that quilt on display, some way, shape, or form.
The NAMES Project quilt needs to continue to exist in some fashion, whether that be in one location as part of the National Memorial, or if it's divided up and maintained in art museums, health departments, community organizations, because it still will stand for a huge amount of human loss, but also it's also a marker, much like a tombstone is. People will need to go and continue to see it.
One of my immediate thoughts was to burn the quilt as a memorial, in a memorial fashion. But certainly if that were to offend people or hurt people's feelings who have a part in it, then some method of storing and perhaps display of parts of it at a time in a museum.
I agree that it should be permanently placed somewhere of importance. In Washington, I think, would not be a bad place.
Well, I think the power of the quilt, when Cleve Jones talks about that, when he started this, he was looking for a way that could break down the barriers, the stigma, the prejudice that existed around AIDS in 1987 when the first panel was sewn. I think when he speaks of the power of the quilt, he's talking about that ability to transform stigma into acceptance, to lower the barriers, to really reach for the common denominators, to put something in front of Americans that is non-threatening, that they can relate to, where they can really learn about the person and not prejudge the person because they had AIDS.
For more information on AIDS, Cleve Jones, and the AIDS Memorial Quilt, visit AOL keyword Names Project or the web.
That about does it for today's show. For more information on GNN, visit our website at http://members.aol.com/gaynewsnet.
If you'd like to drop us a line, write us at gaynewsnet@aol.com. Taking us out of today's show is some additional footage from the AIDS Memorial Quilt in Washington, D.C. I'm Holly Landau.
And I'm Joe Liberatore. Thanks for joining us.
Very dear friend of mine, I lost him to AIDS. And I'm here for the celebration of life today because I'm living with HIV. So this is centralized around in memory of him and in recognition of those who lost their lives.
Tony loved to travel. So I said that we know you're traveling high in the sky, in the clouds, gone too soon.
You know, like so many people, I've lost numerous friends and a partner to AIDS. One, there's a sense of healing for me to be here, to see those panels, but also as an opportunity to take part in a very important statement that we must remember what this epidemic has done, what it's doing, and what it's going to continue to do, and that we cannot be silent about that.